So today we're going to talk about something that I don't really talk about, especially not on the internet, which is my obsessive-compulsive disorder. So first of all, to dispel any misinformation, I'm going to give a quick lowdown of exactly what OCD is, and then we're going to talk about specifically my experiences, because the title of this video, not clickbait. So obsessions are intrusive thoughts which can be highly distressing or anxiety inducing. Intrusive thoughts are basically thoughts that you don't consciously think, they just pop into your head. Like if you read a sign saying don't think about a pink elephant, and a pink elephant will come into your head, but often there's not a sign there, there's no trigger, it just happens. So in the stereotypical idea of OCD, of washing hands, the intrusive thoughts might be about germs or contamination or illness or something like that. But these thoughts can vary wildly. So you can also have extremely violent thoughts, you can have thoughts of harming yourself or others, you can have images that come into your head, so very distressing or graphic images, sexual, violent, that come into your head and play over and over again. And the distress is heightened by the very fact that these are things that you would not consciously think of. So you'll have parents with OCD whose intrusive thoughts are about harming their children, even though they would never actually want to harm their children or be thinking about harming their children. The fact that this is playing over and over in their head is what's causing that distress and anxiety. So how do you cope with all of these things that are now in your head? Well, that's where the compulsions come in. So compulsions are the things that you do which can stop the thoughts happening or decrease them, at least for a temporary while. Rituals or things that you do can be physical or they can be in your head. So an obsessive thought might be that your kitchen is contaminated, your hands are covered in germs, and you're going to get seriously ill because of it. And the compulsion may come out as compulsive hand washing. You know, people who have that kind of OCD can end up with like sores and cracks in their hands from overwashing, from bleaching their hands. And it's not just the action, it's every time they're doing that, it's because they're having these horrendous thoughts that's causing them a lot of physical stress and anxiety internally. People with complex mental compulsions, as they're called, which is compulsions that happen inside your head and the way that you think, and that's called pure OCD, which was what I was originally diagnosed with. So let's talk about my experiences. So I was diagnosed when I was 17, and this was something that I had been struggling with for a long time, like into my childhood. One of my earliest memories is of having an intrusive thought, and I actually skipped school to go and get diagnosed just because I didn't want anyone to find out about it. And that's something that I really want to stress, is the fact that OCD, if you think about the idea that you're having these intrusive thoughts which are exactly things that you think are repulsive, that you think are horrendous, that you don't want anything to do with, but you can't stop thinking them, and with the stigma around mental health in general, I feel like you can see how this is something that you wouldn't want to tell people about. So as I got older, my intrusive thoughts changed, but my compulsions had always been the same. It was always in threes. So everything I did had to be in threes, I had to walk in threes, I had to count in threes, I had to click in threes. Everything was about the number 3, and that was, if I did that, then that was something that would alleviate the thoughts. I'd have trips up to see my grandma. She lived in Yorkshire, and it would be hours and hours of a drive, and I would spend the entire time counting the lampposts in threes to try and stop these distressing thoughts. Or I knew that the thought of something bad happening, I knew logically that it wasn't going to happen, but the feeling of dread was so there, and that was the only way that I could feel to combat it. The intrusive thoughts that I have are about people. It's kind of like 2 steps. So I have these intrusive thoughts about people, which are things that I would never normally think. So they are things that are like sexist or racist or homophobic. And these are things that I don't believe and don't actually think, but they're just thoughts that come into my head. But then the second step of that is that I have the immediate next thought is, they can hear what you just thought. And so my compulsion then becomes, which is why it's the pure O, like mental compulsions, is that my compulsions become having to keep up this like mantra of like, I'm so sorry, it's my OCD, I don't really think this, I'm so sorry, it's my OCD, I don't really think this, to that person, even though I know logically they can't hear me. There's this intrusive thought is that people can hear what you're thinking, people can read your mind, and the compulsion calms me down because of this weird internal logic where I know that I don't think it. So I'm like, well, if this person can read my mind, they can hear that I'm saying this, and if they dig deeper into my mind and go to like my conscious and my subconscious, they'll be able to see very easily that I don't actually think this about them and that it is the OCD. And that's like the only thing that will calm me down. You know, it's frustrating when people say things very casually about mental illnesses. like, oh, I'm so OCD, like I always have to tidy my desk before I leave it. It's something that I'd hope that people wouldn't do if they actually knew what this stuff was. Hopefully this video can be the start of a conversation about OCD, which can be a little bit destigmatizing. It's a thing that a lot of people have. It's a thing that people have various different intrusive thoughts for and very similar compulsions, and it comes out in lots of different ways, and I feel like talking about it can only really be a good thing. If you'd like to help support me make more videos like this, then you can donate to my Patreon. The link is in the description, along with links to all my social media, so you can find me all over the internet. And until I see you next time, bye.